Good evening, Brent.
Hello, Scott.
How do I do tonight?
I do.
I am interested to get into this Wyoming episode.
The only thing I really want to say is I'll put a top comment whenever we release this one also, but we've been doing these shorter. If anybody has anything to say about that, do y'all like the shorter haunted episodes versus the longer format of these? Throw it in the comments. Let us know if you like this or if you liked us to do more places in each state.
Yeah, and that comes from a standpoint of what we're trying to do is get these down to about 30 minutes to 45 minutes roughly is what we're shooting for. Give or take, obviously. It's never going to be on point there, but we're trying to be able to focus a little bit more on our main series and main episodes. Focus more on the murder and true crime aspects, which is fine and all, but if it's something that y'all are wanting, if you're wanting to hear 4 or 5 different places in a state instead of 1 or 2, yeah, comment, let us know.
Would be happy to do it still. Hello, I'm Brent.
And I'm Scott.
And this
is Strange Embers. Brent, do you want to hop into the wheel spin?
Let's get it.
Spinning. We have New York.
What are we up to? Is this 13?
It's going to be episode 13 coming up. New York, yes, sir. So, do you want to lead this off? The silver platter is handed to me. So, have you ever heard of the Oregon Trail?
The game?
Well, that was a game, yes, but no, the actual Oregon Trail.
Like you died of dysentery?
The game was actually released on PC in like the 70s.
Yes, it's very, very old.
Yes. Anyway, I am going to be talking about a city that was one of the main places on the Oregon Trail in Wyoming, and it's called South Pass City. So I'm going to give you a little history on the actual place, and then we're going to talk about a person that makes this place, I guess you'd say, haunted. It's a little lore behind it, and we're just going to get into it. So South Pass City is an unincorporated community in Fremont County, Wyoming. It's located 2 miles south of the intersection of Highway 28 and Highway 131. And it was a former station on the Oregon Trail. After the gold mines and everything from the gold rush were closed, it became a ghost town. And the entire community left, pretty much. Now, if you look at the National Register of Historic Places, the entire community is actually listed there. Like the original community. It's pretty cool.
That is.
It was developed rapidly as a stage and telegraph station on the Oregon Trail during 1850s. And it was the site of the first settlement in the area, which was about 9 miles south of present-day South Pass City, which is known as Burnt Ranch, Burnt Ranch. What's crazy about Burnt Ranch is it is actually located exactly where the immigrant trails crossed the Sweetwater River for the last time and ascended towards the South Pass. So if you do some research on Burnt Ranch, it's pretty interesting as well. In August 1861, there was a 25-year-old named Samuel Clemens, who was later Mark Twain, passed through South Pass City via stagecoach with his brother Orion, newly appointed as Secretary of Nevada Territory. Mark Twain later wrote about the experience in Roughing It, which was first published in 1872. The hotel keeper, postmaster, blacksmith, the mayor, the constable, and the city marshal, as well as the principal citizen and property holder, all came out and greeted us cheerily, and we gave him good day. That's from Mark Twain. In 1867, gold was discovered in the vicinity, and a year later, prospecting began on what would become the Carissa mine. Prospectors and adventurers quickly arrived and founded South Pass City. Within a year, the community's population had swelled to about 2,000. William H. Bright was a saloon owner who was elected to the Wyoming Territorial Legislature and served as the president of the Territorial Council, and introduced a woman's suffrage bill, which passed. When the Women's Suffrage Act was signed into law by Territorial Governor John A. Campbell on December 10th, 1869, Wyoming became the first jurisdiction in the United States to grant women the right to vote, a right which was not granted women nationally until 1920. So I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's started here as well.
I did not.
It's pretty cool. Within a decade, the city's population shrank dramatically as the large gold deposits that had been hoped for failed to materialize. By the mid-1870s, South Pass City's population was reduced to about 100 people, but apparently grew to 180 by 1901. Over the next century, the population of South Pass City declined even further. Many of the city's homes, stores, hotels, and saloons fell into despair. A few businesses continued to operate in South Pass City, with the last of the pioneer families finally moving out in 1949. Now, that's just a little history on the actual place. Now we're going to get into a female by the name of Polly Bartlett. She was known as the murderess of Slaughterhouse Gulch, which was Wyoming territory, also known as South Pass City. She is said to have been the first serial killer in Wyoming before it was even incorporated as a state. While the story had been repeated in several publications, Wyoming historians such as Phil Roberts and John Lane say that there is no proof that the story is true. This is where the lore comes from. According to stories, in 1868, there were a total of 22 murders where every victim was found buried on Bartlett's property. And it is said that anytime a man entered the family lodge, she had help from her father, Jim, who also went by the name of John and Stephen. They, don't ask me, don't know. That's just the three names that he would go by. Jim, John, Stephen. A 1963 article by Dean W. Ballinger and published in the popular Real West magazine is one of the earliest and most detailed accounts of the Bartlett family murders. Today, South Pass City is a ghost town in arrested decay, and Bartlett's Inn is regarded as a folk tale by the local citizens. Now, a little bit of the case history behind it, where the actual lore is here. Bartlett lured businessmen and other wealthy travelers into her lodge with extremely valuable belongings on their person, typically gold, because it's a gold town. Every time she gave them meals and whiskey, they would always be laced with arsenic to poison them. Jim helped bury the men's bodies, and if anyone asked about their disappearances, the daughter and father would lie, saying the indigenous Americans and outlaws took them. Which that would be an easy lie to say because they had gold. Polly and Jim had early beginnings in their career crimes, where they ran a saloon in Ohio. Polly isolating men for sex before Jim robbing them. Polly's first victim was Lewis Nichols, which gave her and Jim $4,000 worth of material, which gave them the money that they constructed the lodge in South Pass City, where a lot of traffic came during the gold rushes. When they killed Theodore Fountain in August, the son of mine owner Bernard Fountain, Bernard hired investigators from Pinkerton to track his son's whereabouts. Polly and Jim left town in August once realizing they were found out, leading the police unearthing the remains of the men they killed once combing through their property. When a price was put on the heads...
You said about $4,000?
Yes.
That would be equivalent to about $161,000 now.
Wow. Yeah, so that's a chunk of change. When a price was put on their heads, Ed Ford, who evaded being murdered by the Bartletts, only for his brother Sam to end up a victim, set out to capture them. On October 7th, Ed wound up shooting Jim dead and turned Polly in for trial and execution. That evening, Polly was shot dead through the window of her jail cell by Otto Kalkhorst, a German-born man assigned to one of Fountain's mines, who wasn't charged by Esther Morris, which was the first American female justice of the peace, so the country could put the case to rest. That's what I've got for Wyoming. So, Brent, what do you have?
Yellowstone National Park. There are quite a few ghost stories, ghost tales that come from Yellowstone. The one that I want to talk about is from the Old Faithful Inn. So the legend of this starts in 1915 in New York. There was a teenage daughter from a wealthy ship company owner, and they labeled her as a rebel for the time. And she portrayed herself and thought of herself as being like more of a modern woman of those times. And she didn't want to have an arranged marriage that they were trying to have for her. And the arranged marriage would have been for a son from another wealthy family from around. She didn't want that. Instead, she wanted to marry a man that actually worked in the house as a servant that was much older than her. Her father tried to convince her and show her that the servant that she wanted to marry was just being a gold digger and just wanting her for her money and not in love with her or the gentleman that he has tried to show himself as. But even through all of what her father did trying to convince her not to do this, she still chose the servant and went ahead with having a wedding with him. Her father was very disheartened on her continuing on and having this wedding, but he still had a plan. If she didn't want to listen to the advice that he was giving her about this man just being a gold digger, he still had one more plan up his sleeve. For a wedding gift to the couple, he gave a substantial amount of money as a one-time lump sum, here is your wedding gift. But this offer of the wedding gift of the money came with an agreement that if the couple accepted the money, they would not receive any more support from him, from the family, that from that point forward, they're on their own, and that they would leave New York as well. So her father was hoping that with this, even though the money was up there, that this agreement that they would have to do this would show her of who he is, because she wouldn't want to cut this off. And he was hoping that by doing that, the servant that she was marrying, that he would call off the wedding before they got married, knowing that there's just this one amount of money, one lump sum, and that's it. They're not going to have access to any more of the family funds. However, to the disheartened father, they did agree to the lump sum of money. And they decided to go to Yellowstone for their honeymoon. They stayed at the Old Faithful Inn in room 127. At that time, it was a fairly new hotel, being that it was built around 1903, 1904. It was the place at then to go take a fashionable vacation, they said. Well, it did not take very much time for her newly found husband to start to show his true colors. On the way to Yellowstone, he spent lavish amounts of money at the taverns and playing poker. The couple had been a month into their honeymoon trip when they ran out of money. There wasn't even enough money to pay for their hotel bill then. So the staff of the Old Faithful Inn, they witnessed nightly arguments between them. They said that the arguments were loud enough that they could be heard outside of their private room. And by now, she was starting to see her misjudgment in him. And she phoned home to ask her father for some money. And he said no. He stuck by what he was going to do. So one night, they were having an argument. It was louder and more violent than usual. The husband stormed out of the hotel room. He slammed the door. And that was the last anyone saw of him. The hotel staff gave the new bride her privacy for a couple of days to let all of this kind of boil over. But then they became worried and decided to go peek inside the room because she hadn't left the room ever since he left. When they opened the door, they said it looked like a hurricane had came through and thrown every bit of the bedding, clothing, everything all around the room. But the new bride was nowhere to be found in the bedroom. A hotel maid ventured over into the bathroom, and she began to scream. Her scream was loud enough that a lot of the staff and guests came to find out what was going on, and they found the body of the bride in the bathtub and missing her head. Although they searched the hotel and the grounds around, they couldn't find her head anywhere. After a couple of days, their attention began to be directed to the highest point in the hotel, and that was up into the crow's nest. This is where they would have a house band, and this is where the house band would play. And there began to be a horrible odor that was emanating from that vicinity. So they began to search up there. And upon further investigation, they found the bride's head in the crow's nest. So over the years, guests have cited apparitions of a woman wearing a flowing white dress walking down the stairs from the crow's nest with her head under her arm. One of the stories came from the assistant manager of the Old Faithful Inn, George Bornerman. In 1991, he gave an interview, and he told of a winter closing night at the inn when there was just him and one other staff member at the hotel. George said he heard running in the hallway, and he went outside of his room a couple of times to investigate what he heard, and he saw no one. This happened a couple of times. And then he said around midnight when he heard it again, he ventured down the hall and onto the balcony area to see what it was he was hearing. This is where he saw the ghost on the stairs for a few short moments. The only person he told about this experience was the other coworker that was working there that night. Later on, after he had moved home to Montana, George again confided in his coworker. I was doing research on the Yellowstone, and I found that in 1950 there had been a murder in the inn, he said to his coworker, and it happened in room 127, and that just happened to be the same room that he was in. They found a woman murdered in there, he said, in a wedding dress. They found her in the bathtub. The bathtub was full of blood, and she had been decapitated. But the joke was on everyone because in another interview that George had, he admitted to making up the whole story in 1983. He thought the story would make the inn seem more mysterious and creepy. He also thinks that it is quite humorous when visitors repeat the fictitious story that he made up years ago. The part about hearing running in the hall inside the deserted hotel was true, though, and it's what gave him the idea to try to come up with a story to go along with it. The crow's nest that I spoke of, you cannot go into the crow's nest anymore. There was a earthquake in 1959 near the west side of Yellowstone, and it did some damage to the inn. It crumbled a chimney, and it twisted up some of the timbers that are supporting the crow's nest, making it unsafe for guests to go up and visit it up there anymore. There is a video of this that I'm going to put in, which you've probably already been watching. And that is the story of the Headless Bride that I have for the Yellowstone's Old Faithful Inn.
That was a very interesting story, Brent. Wyoming was really interesting, Brent. I enjoyed it.
But did you, though?
No, I really did.
But did you, though?
Yeah, I definitely did. Hey, I want to thank everybody for watching this.
I'm delirious. We do want to thank everybody that's listened to us, that supported what we're doing. We do truly thank you. If anybody does want to help support the channel in any kind of way, subscribes, likes, all of that stuff helps. Patreon, even if you become a free member, that helps a lot over there. We're trying to get out there, on everything that we can get there, bring y'all better stuff, and thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.
Toodles.